So we have Lindsay here. Lindsay, I'll let you go ahead and kind of start on what you do and kind of your day to day. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to be here. I'm Lindsay O'Reilly. I am a registered dietitian and have a private practice here. I'm in the same office as WellCore, and I focus a lot on thyroid disorders, so hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's disease. I also do a lot of stuff around the gut health, GI stuff, autoimmune disease, other hormone issues. And so I have a private practice called Lindsay O'Reilly Nutrition, and I work one-on-one with mostly women. So that's what I do. And I've had my private practice for 6.5 years, and I've been a dietitian for 20.
Wow. You've got a lot of experience. I love that.
Well, I'm old. That's what that says.
Not old, just a little older.
Older experience.
Oh, there you go. Wisdom. Okay, so I know you have a lot of expertise, but today we're going to kind of talk about more of why nutrition is important, specifically with fertility health. Now, and I know a lot can go into fertility health, including thyroid, history of autoimmune, any other diagnoses. I know inflammation, a lot goes into it. So we'll kind of piece through different things. But I just wanted to kind of talk about in general, why is nutrition important in fertility health?
Yeah. Well, nutrition, everything in our body really starts with nutrients. We need nutrients in order for processes to run in our body. So that's making energy, that's producing hormones, that's, all the way down to ovulation, and everything really relies on nutrients in our body. So nutrition really is foundational for how we feel, how our body works. So it's a big deal. So it can make a big impact on hormone production, hormone status, and then I know we'll talk a little bit about some of the other kind of pieces of infertility, like PCOS or endometriosis, thyroid issues. We'll talk a little bit more, into those, but that's what I would say about nutrition. It just is so foundational.
Right. It's like the building blocks that we need for everything else moving forwards.
Exactly.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. Okay. So I know obviously with fertility, we look a lot at hormones, which I know nutrients are the building blocks of hormones, but also looking at, especially with our females, egg quality. And so what different things can impact egg quality, or just fertility in general?
Yeah. So, fertility in general, egg quality can be a lot of different things. Egg quality, we kind of think about nutrient status, like we talked about. We might think about, we might even think about environmental toxins and the detoxification process. We could think about oxidative stress happening in the body. So there's a couple of things that could impact egg quality. Fertility is a little bit more kind of a broader topic where there can be a lot of other things that really impact fertility, from hormones to kind of hormone related disorders. Thyroid, which is a lot of what I do, is a big one here too. And one I think that's not really fully assessed enough in all women. I think autoimmune disease can play a role. There's many things that can play a role in fertility, but it can kind of be this trickle down process, right? So if you're struggling with ovulation, well, why is that? And you kind of have to peel back those layers to figure out what's truly causing problems.
Right. And figure out the why.
Exactly.
Are there things that people can do to help with the oxidative stress and the nutrients, on a basic level? I don't know, sleep or, blood sugar or posture, or things like that can help. Something easy that's going to be okay, I'm going to change this habit in my life.
Specifically for oxidative stress. So I would think about, that's a hard question to answer. I would think about a couple of things. So I would think about antioxidants in like food, because antioxidants like scavenge those free radicals and that oxidative stress. So it can make a big difference. So things
Yeah.
like colorful foods, right? Like berries and beets and greens, and getting those colorful foods and antioxidants can be really helpful. I also think about like what's causing oxidative stress, right? Are you
Right.
smoking? Are
Right.
you, getting a lot of toxins, exposure to a
Yeah.
lot of toxins
Like
via,
alcohol, would that be
yep,
something?
100%.
What
Alcohol
about
could
like
be the,
lack of sleep?
mhm,
Does
sure.
that increase it?
Could.
Okay.
Yeah, and like, I don't know, melatonin we might talk about later too, but melatonin is an antioxidant. And so when you aren't sleeping enough and when you have disrupted circadian rhythm, which
Mhm.
circadian rhythm is like our light and dark cycles, when that's disrupted, that can affect melatonin production, which
Yeah.
is an antioxidant. So that could be part of that as well.
Stress. Yeah. Yeah. I know too, like people talk a lot about like blood sugar regulation, especially with like PCOS and fertility, and just like learning about the different drops and spikes in our like blood sugar and cortisol can affect fertility. So how do you like, what do you recommend for like balancing blood sugar or paying attention to that? Like, what are things that someone can do to help with that part of it?
Yeah, so blood sugar can be both. Diet can be also lifestyle.
Mhm.
So diet wise with blood sugars, I really start with more balanced meals. So making sure that there is adequate protein and
Mhm.
adequate fat with meals, because those two things help to prevent that blood sugar spike that can happen.
Yeah.
So we're trying to keep blood sugars. You're going to have it go up and down. That's just normal. That's how our body works, but you don't want it to like spike super high. And so protein and fat can really help that. So that's one thing that we work on. Meal timing can also be really helpful. So not skipping meals,
Yeah.
because that can cause blood sugar drops, which then can cause a rise, because you usually are wanting like more high sugar foods, high carbohydrate
Something
foods.
quick.
So yep, something quick, exactly. Like we think about Coke or orange juice or candy is usually what people
Mhm.
talk about with like blood sugar, low blood sugars. So meal timing. So not going too long without eating, but also not eating too often. Because if you're snacking like every hour or 2 hours throughout the day, that gives your body more of a chance to spike that blood sugar and to pump out more insulin to bring it down, which can then cause more insulin resistance. So for most people, snacking often throughout the day really isn't very helpful. And
Yeah.
so it's just trying to figure out what works best for the individual person.
Right.
Other things that can affect blood sugars would be sleep. Not sleeping enough is a huge, huge issue for blood sugars. Stress can also cause blood sugar, higher blood sugars. So lifestyle is important as well.
Yeah. When as far as like the fat and the protein, are there certain healthy like fats and proteins that you like recommend with like your breakfast or your meals?
Yeah, so healthy fats, I really like avocados, avocado oil. I love olive oil, olives, things
Mhm.
that are a little bit more natural and not as processed.
Yeah.
I like natural fats from foods too, can be really helpful. Nuts and seeds have really good healthy fats. Fatty fish can be really good. And then as far as proteins go, I just really like a variety.
Mhm.
And, as high quality as we can get is really helpful, but whatever you like as far as protein goes. If
Yeah,
we
but
talk
you
about,
eat it.
yeah, and I love animal proteins, if I'm being really honest, and that's nothing against a vegetarian, but they're so nutrient dense in nutrients that we don't get from a lot of other foods, like a lot of B vitamins, the active form of vitamin A, which is really, really important. So a lot of us don't convert beta carotene over to the retinol form of vitamin A. Um, so anyway, for nutrient purposes,
Yeah.
I really love animal proteins.
What about carbs? Like, are carbs okay to have in your diet? Because I know
Yep.
sometimes they can cause like a quick, you know, jump in blood sugar sometimes depending on the type of carb that you have.
Yes. Yeah, the type of carb makes a big difference. Again, pairing that with fat and protein also makes a big difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Something that has fiber is going to take a little bit longer to digest, so it doesn't spike as, your blood sugar as quickly as if you had a piece of candy or a soda.
Right.
So types of carbs make a big difference, but carbs are also important. And I would say, especially for women who are going through hormone issues, who are talking about fertility, the only caveat to that would be somebody who really truly has insulin resistance,
Yeah.
diabetes, maybe even a PCOS picture. Then we might want to kind of figure out what their carb sweet spot is, because we don't want to probably go too low, but we also don't want to go too
Right.
high where someone else might be able to tolerate that higher carb load. So
kind of looking at the individual and like what's the amount for them that would be
exactly.
best for them, which I love that individualized approach that you take, and also that you're trying to peel back the layers and find like the why in it, get down to the basics and the building blocks. Because I feel like my experience with some of my Mercier patients in fertility is, they're not having these practitioners dig deep and like figure out the why or do the tests,
Yeah.
to dig a little bit deeper into their health, especially
Well, you
their
can't,
thyroid.
yeah. And you can't put everybody in the same box.
Right.
Like, you're struggling with the infertility and you're struggling with it and you're struggling with it. You're not all the same person. So it's really important to figure out, why is that happening and what can we do about it? So we can't really just put everybody in the same box and treat everybody
Right.
the same.
Right. I agree with that 1,000%. And I wish other people, other practitioners also agreed with that.
I know. Same.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So, as far as nutrition goes, like I know there's certain things you can do, like, eat the proteins and fat with your carbs, eat enough calories, not
Mhm.
skip meals, right?
Mhm.
Um, like cut inflammatory foods to help with
Yep.
like oxidative stress. What are examples of inflammatory foods?
So I tend to think more of like the really highly processed foods. So even like ultra processed fats, that can be part of that. Trans fats. I think about a lot of sugar, a lot of added sugar. And it's not necessarily that it's going to be a problem if you have it, every once in a while. It's really kind of that load of it. Um, and there's a lot of just foods that have a ton of ingredients, ton of additives,
Yeah,
those kinds of
like
things. Those are
looking at
kind of
that.
what I think about. And then there can be foods specifically to the person that can be inflammatory if they have food sensitivities. That's a whole different topic, but can be very common in women with autoimmune disease, autoimmune thyroid disease, endometriosis, like those inflammatory conditions. There's also often a gut and food sensitivity component there.
Mm-hmm.
So taking that into consideration for some women, that could be important, like dairy or gluten, right? But that doesn't mean that everybody needs
Right,
to
right.
eliminate foods. But
Yeah. Do you do that testing to see if they have
so
food sensitivities?
I have, and I used to. I don't do it as much anymore because it's not super accurate,
Mm-hmm.
and it
Yeah,
tends to cause more food restrictions and more food fears when you have like that solid data in front of you that says maybe you shouldn't have this or this or this.
right.
And it can be stressful. And so
Yeah,
for a lot of women that I see, they've been on a lot of diets already. They've tried a lot of things. They're maybe not. So I think going back to foundations with nutrition is important. I think we can also do an elimination diet
yeah.
and try to
Pay
trigger
attention.
what those foods might be, but also can we work on some gut health so that you tolerate foods better? So,
Yeah.
those types of things I tend to focus on now more than food sensitivity testing, but it's available and it can be done. That's just not my go-to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, like, I know it sometimes doesn't make sense talking about the gut and fertility, but like if our trunk and our gut is like inflamed and not functioning well, then we don't have the building blocks and the nutrients that we need for hormones. And then also like inflammatory, if our whole gut area, because remember our gut even goes down towards our uterus, is inflamed, then it's not a good environment to carry a pregnancy either.
Yeah.
So there's just so much that like goes into it, even though it just sounds so simple, like nutrition.
Yeah, it's
No.
not. It is complicated. And you're right, gut health. I also think of that as kind of foundational too. And if you have some kind of infection or dysbiosis, like those are stressors in the body too, not just thinking about when we talk about stress, not just thinking about, stressful situations or
Right.
like that type of stuff is stressful and can cause other health issues.
Right. Oh yeah. Just in general stress. I mean, not only can it cause gut health issues, but your pelvic floor too can
Mm-hmm.
cause a lot of issues down in your pelvic floor. Like our brain is just mind body is such an important thing.
Yes.
With gut health and pelvic floor health in general.
Yep.
Okay, so as far as like, let's say I come in to see you and I don't know if I have PCOS or a thyroid issue or a cortisol issue. Like, how do you kind of dig deeper and look into that?
Yeah. So first of all, I start with a phone call with most of my incoming clients to kind of talk through what are their main problems, what are their main pain points, what are they looking for, to
Mm-hmm.
then say, okay, these are the things that we probably need to look at. But for all of my clients, I start with really thorough blood work.
Mm-hmm.
And I use that as more kind of assessment. So I'm looking for red flags, I'm looking for patterns, I'm looking for just some things that might pop out to say, okay, here's some things to work on, or here's kind of where we need to dig a little bit deeper. I don't diagnose and I can't prescribe medication. So I'm not looking to diagnose somebody with a thyroid disorder and then
Right.
give medication. I'm looking to say, I think this is probably an issue for you. And here are some things that we can work on. So I start there and then I have them do a really thorough intake form. So I get all the information that I can about them, their background, their health history, symptoms, just everything. And then we kind of dig in little by little. So we typically start with nutrition. We're going to add in lifestyle. We're probably going to add in some
Right.
supplementation, and do that all based on labs, health history, symptoms. And if there's anything else that we really want to look at deeper, we can do that. So we could do a stool test to look at the gut to see if there's
Mm-hmm.
any infections or dysbiosis or something going on.
Yeah.
We can do some more thorough in-depth hormone testing or adrenal cortisol testing. So we can do some other things if something kind of pops up, as a concern.
Okay. What is
Does
dysbiosis?
that answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Kind of how you dig
Yeah,
deeper into that. Because I
yeah,
know like fertility doctors aren't doing that from what I've experienced and from what I've heard my patients experience. Like they're not digging deeper and looking at the thyroid. And I do feel like, I don't know exactly, and you might be able to answer this a little bit better, but I feel like the thyroid is absolutely related to your fertility directly. And they're not
yeah,
looking into that. And so it's nice to
yeah.
know that you are.
Yeah, let's hit that next. Yeah, and I think part of the problem is they know what they know and
Right.
they, right, do what they've learned. And I think sometimes you have to seek other options
Yeah.
for more information, but it is really frustrating. And I think thyroid in general is hard, no matter if it's a fertility issue or not. Most conventional medical practitioners don't dig very deep. And so we miss a lot of people.
Yeah.
That's really common.
Yes. Yeah, because I know from what I've heard, they just get their TSH checked, and there's
Yeah.
a lot of other markers to check. Is that right?
Mhm. Yep. A
Um,
lot.
to look at. Because okay, so if you have a thyroid issue, it's either what, hypo or hyper, right?
Yep. So
Uh,
there's hypothyroidism, which is low thyroid hormone. That's usually kind of sluggish thyroid. There's hyperthyroidism, which is high thyroid hormone or kind of a revved up overdrive thyroid. And then there's two autoimmune conditions that are associated with the thyroid, Hashimoto's and Graves' disease. So Hashimoto's is usually associated with hypothyroidism and Graves with hyper. So like for instance, hypothyroidism, it's estimated about 90% of cases are autoimmune, which is a really high percentage. And that's really why I advocate for people to get tested for autoimmune disease so that they know, because it's such a high percentage. So,
right,
but they're not getting that testing done initially through their doctor.
right. Because is PCOS also autoimmune?
No, not technically. It could potentially have some immune dysregulation involved. And I think women with PCOS are at a higher risk of developing a hypothyroidism and or
Okay, so it
Hashimoto's.
could be
Same with
related.
yes, same with endometriosis. Endometriosis is it's an inflammatory condition, and we can talk about that later, but it is pretty associated also with the immune system. So I think that's not technically an autoimmune disease, but I think it's considered close to that because of the immune component.
Yeah. Yeah, we can get into it. I know endo
Yeah.
can be its
Do it is
own
it is
webinar,
totally its own.
but we'll
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that. Okay, so how can the thyroid affect, like, an autoimmune be a factor in fertility? Like, what are some things that it's affecting that could therefore like affect fertility?
Yeah. So if we think about thyroid, the thyroid hormones have a receptor on basically every cell in our body to run kind of all of the things in our body, like metabolism or metabolic rate, digestion, detoxification, how we process our cholesterol out of the body. Like thyroid hormone is really, really important for a lot of things. It also plays a role in hormone balance. It plays a role in ovulation, which obviously is important for
Right. Yeah.
conceiving.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it really, and it kind of starts in the brain too, because the brain controls the thyroid, the brain controls the ovaries, the brain also controls the adrenals. Those are kind of our different brain axes. But so it can affect ovulation, which is, I think, really kind of the root of that
Right.
problem and
Right.
affects fertility. So,
Right. Because we need to ovulate.
mhm.
Right.
I like coming from the brain, it can also increase prolactin, which can cause a problem with how the brain signals with the FSH and LH, can
Mm-hmm.
cause a short luteal phase. So
Right.
there
So it
can be
can mess
multiple
with
issues.
all the phases of your cycle.
Exactly.
Yeah, including the follicular phase with the LH and the FSH, and then your luteal phase after you ovulate. So yeah, that makes sense that it should be tested and looked into for sure.
Right. Absolutely. It should be. And it really can be easily missed. And I also think with thyroid, like the symptoms can overlap with a lot of other things, right? So we have like fatigue and low energy is really common,
Yeah.
constipation is common, mood issues, weight
Yes.
gain, dry skin, dry hair, irregular periods. That's very common. And so I think a lot of times those pieces aren't put together. They get treated individually or
Yeah.
kind of like, oh, then maybe you need to do this or you need to. So I think sometimes the thyroid isn't really considered to be as much of a problem as it could be.
Right. Because it affects so many things.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, just hormones in general, like all the different symptoms you can have with hormone dysregulation. It's wild to me that, yeah, it's just so important to be looked into for so many
Yeah.
people. Okay, I know we talked a little bit about this already, but just if you have like, say, a different type of thyroid issue where it's hypo, and autoimmune disease, like where do you start as far as like nutrition goes?
Yeah, that's a good question. So a lot of times I start with blood sugars. We did talk about that.
Yeah,
Because it really is so foundational for a
right.
lot of things and for even how we feel. So most women who are struggling here have issues with fatigue, sleep, all kinds of stuff, and weight. Blood sugars can make a huge,
Right.
can make an effect in those areas. So we talked a little bit about that. I also came across a study that talked about insulin resistance being 3 times higher in women with recurrent pregnancy loss. And I thought that was really super interesting.
Yeah.
Um, and even thinking about kind of that component of insulin resistance and thyroid, insulin resistance and PCOS. So women who are having that recurrent pregnancy loss, I think that's a really big deal. So that's whether it's hormone, thyroid, just a woman who doesn't feel well, that's a really foundational piece that I work on as far as nutrition. I
Yeah.
also talk a lot about whole foods diet or like a Mediterranean style diet. So trying to give the body as many nutrients as we can via food can be really helpful while we're also kind of removing or decreasing those inflammatory foods that aren't giving as much nutrition.
Yeah.
Um, so a lot of fruits and veggies, quality proteins, those healthy fats, kind of getting
That kind of
back
what's
to.
included in a Mediterranean diet.
Mhm.
I was gonna ask about like fad diets and things
Yeah,
like that,
we can talk
which,
about that too.
so it's nice to know there's something at least you can like look up and research that has some of the building blocks of what you would recommend.
Yeah. Yes. And I think a Mediterranean style diet, they'll typically talk about like a lot of fish, which is fantastic. I don't hate that at all, but I also think including some good other animal proteins can be really helpful for the nutrient content. So so kind of an adjusted Mediterranean diet, so to
Yeah.
speak. And then the other piece of nutrition that I tend to look at would be, are they eating enough? And I
Yeah.
think that's something we don't probably talk about enough because most women here eat less. And a lot of them do that, trying to control weight, trying to control, whatever. And that can be a really big, huge stressor on the body. So
Mhm.
that can then cascade down into the brain's connection with thyroid or the ovaries and affect hormone production. So that's a big deal too. And when you're not eating enough, you're also not getting enough overall nutrients.
Right.
So
I guess I
yeah,
feel like a lot of us with our culture, like just women in our culture, it's like eat less calories and move more.
yep.
But that's not always what your body needs,
So
which a lot of us, I know I have a very type A personality, and so it doesn't matter. Sometimes it's hard to pay attention to what you feel like your body needs and just do your routine. But sometimes, you have to get off the routine and rest or eat carbs,
yep.
or do the things that your body needs because it's so important, like you said, is the building blocks to everything that your body feeds off of and gets energy off of to function.
Yeah. It's hard. I think a lot of women have a trust issue with their body and trusting that
Yeah.
it's going to do what it needs to do with what you give it and not,
Right.
you know, yeah. I think that's part of it too. And just that we seek outside approval for a lot of things. So we're seeking outside, right, approval for eating or
Exactly.
not eating or
Hmm.
our body shape and size. And
Yeah.
so that's hard. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. A lot goes into it.
Yes.
That's good to know. Okay, so besides like nutrition, what other things do you like look at or consider outside of just like diet or food, I
Yeah.
guess?
I look at kind of the big picture of health and wellness. So I'm looking at
I can
stress.
talk about
What is,
lifestyle
yeah,
things,
lifestyle.
right?
Right. So lifestyle, how you're living. So stress, right? I think about that. And that can be in all shapes and sizes. Like, are you skipping meals because you're working,
Right.
15 hours a day? Like, do
Yeah.
you have toxic relationships? Do you have some trauma you need to deal with? Like, what are the things that could be causing a lot of stress? We can't take it all away. So the other piece of stress is really trying to help support the body to manage stressors better.
Yeah.
So that's part of kind of what I do with stress. Talking about environmental toxins and detoxification, those can be really big. So
What
working
are
on
some
detox
examples
pathways
of
of
like,
environmental toxins.
yeah.
Yep. So they can come from, I mean, just the air that we breathe, but I think about plastics are a big one.
Hmm.
I think about water, what's in our water, maybe potentially even toxins in our food. And then like a fragrance. Fragrance is a huge one. So fragrance and candles and like plugins and your car fresh
Yes.
lotions that you put on your body, your laundry detergent. Fragrances are a huge,
I love
huge.
that you brought that up because, being someone who's gone through like infertility and talking to patients about it, you hear that that's like not a good thing, but you don't know why. And
Yeah.
so you bringing up like there's environmental toxins in it, like that makes sense. The why, there's a why behind why you shouldn't do things and why you should. And so I love that you brought that up.
Yeah. I mean, that's a hard topic to get into. And we can definitely
Yeah.
get into that with just some kind of basic starting points, but that's a big one too. I also talk about sleep. And then I do some work with supplements as well. So that's really individualized for the most part based on labs, based on symptoms, kind of based on what's going on.
Yeah. Okay, so like stress and mindset, how does that play a role in fertility? Like I know you go through like that in the like lifestyle, but like I know what stress can cause oxidative stress, which can cause what inflammation in the
Mhm.
gut. But how else can it affect like I guess your hormones and your fertility in
Yes.
general?
So if we think about stress and we think about our stress response system, that is how our body manages the stressor. So it starts in our brain, and then our brain works with our adrenal glands, and it's like this cascade event that happens with hormones and all kinds of stuff. So think about running from the tiger, right?
Mhm.
So that's kind of like that stress response, but your body doesn't know the difference between running from a tiger and you got in a fight with your spouse, or you're stressed about your work project that you have,
Yeah.
or you don't know what to put on the table for dinner tonight. Whatever your stressor is, your body doesn't know the difference. And so it still goes through that cascade process um, to kind of protect you, basically. When you have a lot of stress, so when it's chronic, a
Mhm.
lot of stress over a long period of time, your body prioritizes dealing with the stressor. So the brain starts to do less work with the ovaries and do less work with the thyroid. So it slows down what happens there. And so you may not make the hormones that you should be making. Your thyroid might start to become sluggish because your body is just continuously managing this
The
stress
stress.
response. The brain
Yeah.
is busy,
Right.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that could be part of
Makes a lot
it.
of
It
sense.
is, yeah, so affecting that hormone production, starting with what's going on in the brain. Stress can also impact things like your appetite and your eating habits,
Yeah.
which can over time affect that. Stress is a lot of stressors can be triggering events to start an autoimmune process happening.
Hmm.
So a lot of times those things will happen around really stressful times,
Right.
hormone changes like pregnancy, postpartum, menopause. So it could impact your immune system as well.
Impacts everything. I love
A
how
lot.
you say, like, I'm not going to necessarily get rid of the stress, but let's figure out how to like be able to manage it better. Just because I know a lot of women going through fertility, it's like, people tell them like, just relax, don't think about it. And they're like, I
Sure.
can't not relax and not think about it. Like I have to think about my cycle and when I'm ovulating and pay attention to everything. And like I have to, have questions and answers for doctors and like there's a lot going on. So it's nice like to tell to them if someone told me like, hey, let's figure out how to manage all the stress instead of like, let's just get rid of it. Because to me,
Yeah.
that's just not realistic. So I
It's
just
not,
like the way you say that.
yeah, it's not realistic. And maybe there are a few things that you can do to kind of decrease it. But
Right.
really we want to help the body. And so it's kind of like finding that one thing, because I can give you 10 things to help you to manage stress, but
Yeah.
that's overwhelming.
Right.
So if you can find the one thing that you will do,
Right.
that you
That
don't
helps
mind
you
doing,
individually.
that
Right.
will help you, that's kind of where it's helpful to work with somebody. And then also like we can support the adrenals and stress response with nutrients, like vitamin
Yeah.
C is really helpful. Salt, potassium, magnesium are really helpful. So those electrolytes can be, so
Mhm.
you might see if you are on Instagram and you follow
They're
any
like
practitioners,
adrenal
adrenal
cocktail.
cocktails.
Okay, I was gonna ask
Yes,
that.
exactly. So that's just because when you go through stress, your body basically is burning through these nutrients that the stress response system uses. And so you end up depleted. And then
Yeah.
stress makes it feel worse because you just don't have anything left to like do the stress,
Right.
in your body. And so anyway, there's definitely some ways that we can help to support that.
Yeah. So this adrenal cocktail kind of like gives your body more of those things that are being depleted, I guess.
Exactly.
Nice. Do you like, I know people know if they're stressed or not, but do you like test anything? Or like, I know cortisol is a big like stress hormone. Is there a type of test that you look at to see people's cortisol or stress levels?
Yeah. So and I use the Dutch test. So Dutch stands for dried urine test for
I never knew this.
comprehensive hormone. Like, what letter is that?
That's long. That's
Comprehensive
hard.
hormone. Yeah. But they have an adrenal cortisol portion on their test. So and it looks at 5 points throughout the day. So we're not just looking at that 1 a.m. blood draw cortisol. That doesn't tell
Right.
us anything. So it looks
Right.
at 5 points throughout the day so we can
Yeah,
see
because
where
it
you are.
changes. Yeah.
Exactly. We can see if you're kind of in a normal spot at any point, like how's your morning cortisol looking? How's your nighttime cortisol looking? Is it really high and you can't sleep? That makes sense. So we can kind of see that. We can also see overall cortisol production and how it's getting out of your body. So that's cool. So we can see, are you really making enough? Are you making too much? And we need to really chill out a little bit and support that. So it gives us a little bit more data.
Yeah.
That's what I use. Testing can be helpful, especially for somebody who's like, nah, I don't have any stress. I don't have any stress, which I don't know who says that.
Right, right.
But who doesn't think, so sometimes that data is really helpful to see, okay, there is a problem. But when it comes to stress, it comes down to how you are living your life. And no, we cannot take all the stress away.
Right.
That's obviously not, but like you have to be able to commit to working on it
Mm-hmm.
and to doing things that help to mitigate it.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, if you keep living in that same stressful kind of life
Yeah.
state, like no amount of adaptogenic herbs are going to help that.
Right.
So testing is a moot point at that point. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I do love like when someone thinks of a dietitian, right? They think of just food. And I love that you don't, I mean, yes, food is the nutrients are the building blocks, but you look at lifestyle and you look at all of these things. Like it's just nice to know that you're not just looking at one thing, but looking at a lot of
Yeah,
things. And I do think that sometimes taking that stress away, I don't know if anyone else has felt this way, but sometimes knowing what foods to eat, when to eat them, what to buy can be a stressor. And so
mm-hmm.
if you're helping with the nutrients and that, knowing like what's best for me, like what's the calorie intake for me, when should I be eating, what should I be eating, and knowing that to me kind of helps take away some part of the stress in a
Yeah,
way of like trying to figure out what to do and
yeah,
what to do to help my body do what it needs to do to conceive and carry
for sure.
a child.
And I think some women like it's nice to hear somebody say it's okay to eat butter. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because
Or
it's
bread.
okay to have salt. because we don't hear that. We hear that it's, and bread. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Or gluten-free bread, like
whatever
whatever
you need.
is best, but like carbs.
Right. A
It's
potato.
okay to eat a
It's
potato.
okay. It's
Yeah.
okay. So I think that goes a long way for some women too, just to hear somebody say that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know, I mean, going through some of this myself, someone told me that, and it was so much relief, and it's just such small things because when you're going through something like infertility, especially when you don't know what the problem is, it's nice to hear like simple things of what to do or what can help because you just don't know, you're lost,
Yep.
and having someone like
Well,
you to guide you through is really helpful.
and there's so much information out there. Like we're in this,
Yes.
world of social media, and you can Google everything and you're going to find something different on everything that you look up or every person you follow. And it is nice to have somebody to individualize it to your specific case in
Mm,
your specific body.
yeah.
Um, because you're not, again, like I said, you can't put everybody in the same box. And so I think
Right.
that's a big piece of it where they can't do that for you. And
Right.
you might not need that, and that's okay too. But
Right.
if you do, then that's
Then
super helpful.
and being
Mm-hmm.
able to come to you for questions, like fragrances. Like,
Right.
should I burn my Bath and Body Works candle? Like, Google says different things, but it's nice to come to somebody who is educated and knowledgeable about these things and can have a good answer for not only you in general, but you as an individual.
Yeah.
So I really love that and admire that about you and your practice.
Thanks. And we
Okay.
are in candle season.
Yeah, I know. I know. I just want my whole house to smell like
I
fresh
know.
balsam.
Cinnamon. Yeah. Also a
So
Christmas tree.
bad. Yes. My husband doesn't let me get a real one, so I can't get the smell through a real one.
Oh,
So, anyways, he's afraid of fires, but that's another
yeah.
story. Okay. Okay, so we kind of talked a little bit about like environmental toxins, like the candles and like stress.
Yeah.
Is there anything else? And plastic. Was there anything else we missed to avoid or to try to help with that?
I
Or did
think
we
those are
talk
the big
about
ones. Like I usually recommend starting with plastic, especially in the kitchen. Like, can you do glass food
glass,
storage?
dishware?
Definitely don't heat your food up in plastic. But yeah, can you do glass? Can you do glass drink like cups instead of like throw all
What
your
about
old,
like the stainless steel cups?
great.
Okay.
But like all those old plastic cups I used to get from like the bar and grill up the street, like just toss them.
Oh
You
my God.
don't, they cannot go through the dishwasher 100 more times. Like get rid of those. You know what I mean? Get rid of your plastic like cooking utensils and switch to wood or something. Those are some easy ones that you can do in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And then I think fragrance is another big one. You can switch to essential oils. They do make
Okay. Like a
candles
diffuser.
like a diffuser. That's a great option. You can, make your own like scented soaps and things like that's kind of getting down the line, but you can do a lot with essential oils.
That's nice to know because reproductive endocrinologists say there's not enough studies on essential oils. And so they say to not use them.
well, I
But
think
they
there's
don't
a
say anything about
difference,
not burning candles or anything like that.
right? I think there's a difference in ingesting essential oils
Okay.
and like using them to make a soap or make
Or a
a
scent to your
or put them in your
skin.
bath, right? Your Epsom
Okay.
salt bath, or exactly, or if you want to make your own candle, whatever. I
Yeah.
think that's way safer option. And I'm
Uh-huh.
not going to tell you to ingest essential oils, but like
Right. That
using
makes
them in
sense.
products. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you can
Different.
still diffuse them in the air and get that scent, that Christmas tree scent that you're really wanting.
Yes.
I am mind
Um,
blown with the whole plastic thing in the kitchen. I have a lot of things to go through.
yeah. Yes. I know. I think here's the thing with environmental toxins. It's overwhelming.
Yeah.
We are talking about progress and not perfection.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
one thing at a time, what
Right.
is doable for you with your budget, with
Yeah.
the things that you use, and just take one thing and do one thing at a time. And then when you
Right.
come to like laundry stuff or like beauty products and that kind of stuff, like as you're finishing one thing, then maybe you can look into replacing it with something a little bit better. So you can go to Environmental Working Group. They will like rank things for you in different categories.
Is that
That's
a
a good
website?
source. EWG.org, environmentalworkinggroup.org. So that's a place to find
That's good.
information on that as far as products go. But it's a big topic. And so people think that they need to do it all at once, and you don't. Just slow.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Like if you're gonna grab a utensil, grab the wood one instead of the plastic one that's in your bin, if it's clean.
Yep.
You know.
Yep.
Any other tips on environmental toxins? I like that website. It's nice to go check if, you can't remember what you said or have
Yeah,
thoughts,
I think that's it. I mean, you can get into kind of the nitty-gritty of it, but just kind of take your time going through things and do what makes sense for you.
Yeah.
But we're going to live in a toxic world, and that's just kind of the truth of it. So I think the other kind of flip side of that is also working on making sure that we are giving the body what it needs for proper detoxification. And so we can do some liver support, we can do some detox support, making sure that you're pooping every day is a really big thing for detoxification, especially when it comes to hormones and getting hormones out of the body. So, we can reduce toxins, but we can also really support the body in processing through what.
Oh, you froze for a second, but I think you're back.
You did too.
Okay. Yeah, I love that. It's same thing with like, you can't get rid of the stress entirely, but how can we prepare the body to manage it better?
Yeah.
Which is nice to know that our body can do that, especially with our surroundings and our environment and all the processed things and things that we have around us now. And the prices of, organic and all of the fancy stuff in our society. Okay. Let's see. We already talked about sleep. That's a big thing. Impacting what? Stress, blood sugar.
Yeah. Even our like hunger and fullness hormones like leptin and ghrelin. Sleep is really big for circadian rhythm. Talked about that a little bit too.
Does sleep help you detoxify?
Oh,
okay.
Yep. You do a lot of that at night when you sleep. Helps your brain, helps with like your brain kind of processing. It helps mood.
So many things.
Nobody's in a good mood when they don't sleep.
Do you have a recommended amount of sleep, or just depend on?
And typically like 7 to 8 hours is usually what I recommend.
Sounds about right. Like what you see on the internet. Okay. As far as supplements go, I know we talked about how you would kind of do individualized testing and see like what you would recommend specifically for that person based on their testing, which I love that it's individualized. Are there any like specific ones like in general that are good for egg health, like egg quality, and even like sperm quality for your partner?
Yeah. CoQ10. CoQ10 is an antioxidant, and I see that on both for egg and sperm often. For quality there, it can also boost mitochondrial function. So mitochondria are those powerhouses of our cells, if you remember from biology. But they're important in like energy production, and they're really mitochondrial health is super important. So CoQ10 can be really helpful for that. Melatonin, we talked about melatonin for like sleep, but it's an antioxidant. It can decrease oxidative stress, damage in the follicles. It can improve egg and embryo quality, could improve pregnancy rate in women undergoing IVF, which is interesting. Vitamin D is another one. And I like caveat too, I would never recommend just go and get all these supplements and take willy-nilly. Like you probably need to work with somebody to figure out what you need and how much you need. So I always test vitamin D before I'm recommending anything, because there's some nuances to that too, but it could potentially enhance ovulation, help with egg transport, fertilization, immune system function, inflammation. So vitamin D can help with a lot of things. For women who have PCOS, I like myo-inositol.
I've heard of that.
So it kind of works like metformin in helping with some blood sugar stuff, but it also can help with egg quality, helps with insulin function, could help with restore ovulation and egg development.
Help balancing that blood sugar a little bit.
Yeah. So I love myo-inositol for those women. Those are some of the ones that stick out to me. There's some other nutrients like zinc has been shown with egg quality. Trying to think of what else was on that list. Those are the ones that kind of stick out.
Yeah. Anything else specifically with sperm? I know I've heard like a lot of my patients' partners are taking CoQ10.
Yeah, CoQ10. I don't know. I have a list right here, I think. I just was looking at that earlier. I had it up. Vitamin D, CoQ10.
Okay, so similar.
So similar. I even think, so antioxidants, a lot of that was on there, like alpha lipoic acid, vitamin E. I'm trying to think of what else would be on there, like flavonoids. So those antioxidants could be helpful. I even think for both decent multivitamin or prenatal vitamin. And when I say decent, I don't mean like off the Target shelf.
Right.
Decent where we can get good quality and therapeutic amounts of nutrients that can be really supportive. So that could be kind of more well-rounded nutrient.
Now, is there like a general prenatal you recommend, or do you have to like see the individual and do all the testing and then recommend certain ones?
Not necessarily. There's a couple of really, really good quality prenatals that are done by practitioners who have been in the fertility space that I typically recommend. So I don't think that's a problem as long as you're kind of working towards that.
Yeah, because I know like
go ahead.
Reproductive endocrinologists at least and OBs, there's not really super specific things they look at with prenatals. They just look at, from what I've understood, like the amount of, what's it, methylfolate or folic acid and a couple other things, but they're not like very stringent on or specific on what they want in a prenatal.
Yeah. Choline will be a big one.
Oh, yeah.
Vitamin D is another big one. In the ones that I recommend, they're doing 4,000 IUs in their prenatals. I don't know. I think we've talked about Ayla Barmer. She's a dietitian that worked in fertility previously. She made her own prenatal based on a lot of research and work that she's done called Fullwell. So that's one of the ones that I usually kind of compare everything else to because it's one of the best ones out there. So
good to know a name of one so you can just look into it and start taking it if you feel like it's for you.
Needed is the other brand that I really like.
Needed with an like NEEDED.
Yep. They have a whole bunch. You can. Yep, you can. You can, if you know a practitioner that has a FullScript account, it's available there, or they have a website.
Okay. Okay, this is kind of off topic, but I just wanted to mention this because a lot of my clients either have been diagnosed with it or they think they might have it, is like endometriosis. Can you just talk like a little bit about endometriosis and maybe how you would work with someone with endometriosis?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'm not an endometriosis, like that's not my specialty by any means. I just have had a couple of clients with it. But so endometriosis is it's considered an inflammatory condition. There's often also an immune system connection that goes along with that. So it's often kind of considered autoimmune, or they will often have an autoimmune disease kind of alongside of that. There's also often a gut health component. So most women with endo might also experience some GI issues, GI symptoms. So there's usually something gut-wise going on there as well. Infertility is a major complication of endo. And I think for a lot of women, it takes a long time to get diagnosed because it looks like other things. I don't think it's super clear and it's harder to get in and kind of see what's going on. So there's a connection with endo, and we talked about gut. in
Right.
immune system, but also with thyroid. So some thyroid kind of hormone issues can make endo worse. And there was something else I was going to say about that.
Yeah.
I think the risk of autoimmune disease is also higher, but
So if
so
you're
when
like looking at gut health, looking at thyroid health, looking at inflammation, like
Yeah.
reducing all of these stressors, like you'd think that that would all assist with some endometriosis, like symptoms and the diagnosis of it.
Yep.
Like anyone with endo would benefit from all of these things.
Right. That's the goal. And it might take a little bit of time and you may still have to go and, you know, be seen and make sure things are good there from a physiological standpoint. But yeah, there are things that you can do with diet, with lifestyle, with supplements, that can, in testing, that can absolutely help with endo.
Yeah, I know some of my clients that have done some of their own research look a lot into like anti-inflammatory foods and diets and things like that,
Yes.
which
Yes.
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I think I told you, but in something that in a class that I had done, there was mention that a research article that said a gluten-free diet improved symptoms in 75% of the people in that study with endo.
Yeah.
I thought that
Wow.
was really interesting because
That is interesting.
gluten is highly connected with gut issues.
Right.
And
Right.
so I think that kind of ties that, that all together,
Yeah.
inflammation and yeah.
Yeah. And just
So
can help with that in general. I mean, that's just a good tidbit for people to try. You know, if they do have endo or they have this symptoms of inflammation or things like that, like something, a tool in your toolbox to try
yeah,
out and see, you know, see if it helps your symptoms, see if it helps you in general with all different like sorts of things, not only like fertility, but just, you know, your quality of life, having the
sure.
diagnosis of endo. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so I know you see mainly women, but say you're really doing this for like fertility, like can you involve your partner
Yeah.
with you? Like how would that work? Like if I wanted to work with you, like how would a treatment plan work and how could I involve maybe my partner in this?
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's not something I typically do, but there's definitely a way to assess both the male and the female when it
Takes
comes
two to
to
tango,
exactly. So like why not? It makes sense that we would assess
both.
health and wellness on both sides. And
Right.
so yeah, we could definitely do labs for both and just see if anything shows up or any red flags. Hopefully you've had some testing done you know, on both sides to see if there's anything that we would really need to focus on.
Yeah.
So we really can start with nutritional foundations and kind of, you know, go from there talking about lifestyle, talking about potential
Yeah.
supplementation for egg and sperm quality and those types of things. So yeah,
Right.
we definitely can work through things on both sides. And I think it's nice to approach it together and to,
Yeah.
you know, work together on
Right.
nutrition changes and some of
Right.
that. So it doesn't feel so overwhelming and daunting by
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah, and you can support one another. I think too, you know, it's hard for people, especially if it's like they're hearing from the doctor that it's one-sided, like this is male factor, it's all male, or this is your ovulation, this is all you, and you feel like you're going through it alone, even though, you know, it should be you and your partner who is going through this together. And so it takes both sides. And so I love that approach of like doing it together. And I think it's great to having you see both partners because sometimes one person comes and hears it and gets all the knowledge and gets excited about it and then goes home and is like, we're going to change all these things. We're going to get rid of all our plastic cups, like, you know, and then the partner's kind of like, whoa, like, what are you doing? But being able to educate both parties
Yeah,
and get both parties involved and doing it together is just, I think that's really helpful just through the fertility journey in general. Like you're a team, you know,
I
and kind of
agree.
taking like a team approach. I think that's really great. Yeah,
Yeah. Teamwork makes the dream work.
that's right. And that's why too, I mean, not just you and your partner, but I know we talked a lot about Mercier in our last webinar, but yes, Mercier will help with like inflammation, turning the light on those organs so they're not as sluggish, working, you know, better and getting our hormones to secrete better and having that communication with the pituitary gland. But like you know, I want somebody to be monitoring those hormones and looking at those levels and looking at your thyroid and making sure like, hey, Mercier things are getting better, or like there's just so much involved in fertility. Like, yes, the physical is involved, but the nutrition and the lifestyle, and someone to just dig deeper and look at those blood tests and be able to look at those results and answer questions about toxins, you know, and all of the things like that that you specialize in. I just think you and I as a team together helping these women and men would be just
Yeah,
like a really great approach to just like a whole person, you know?
exactly. I was going to say the same thing. Treat them as a whole person, not just
Right.
as their few hormones that
Right.
we think are the only
Right.
thing that impacts
Right.
it.
Because like you said, there's so much more to it. Like this can affect this, which can affect this, which can affect your ovulation and your LH and your FSH and your cycle and this and implantation and carrying. Like it all affects one another. And so digging deeper and looking at those building blocks, I think is a great starting point for a lot of clients. So
Yeah, for sure.
so yeah, thank you so much for
Yeah. And I
being
can
here and
give
going
you,
through all that.
I was going to say, I can give you a link to a thyroid testing guide that I
Yeah,
have. I don't know if there's a way to add links to any of this, but they can download it. And we didn't really talk about thyroid testing. So it goes through the different thyroid tests and kind
yeah,
of why those are important. So that might be helpful for somebody
yeah.
who had thyroid stuff testing done.
No, that would be great because I know some of my clients have heard that they have issues with their thyroid or they're unsure. And so knowing maybe what test to advocate for
Hmm.
um, would be great. I think go ahead and put it in the chat, like the link in the chat. And
Yep.
then we're gonna send out an email in the like within this week with like a handout on some of the things we talked about today. And then we can include some of these links, like the environmental link and then the thyroid testing link. And then Lindsay, if there's any other links you want to include on there, go ahead and throw them in the chat and we'll put them on the email.
Oh, okay.
And will you also, we'll put all of your information on the email too.
Okay.
That way, if anyone is interested in working with you, they can. Do you do like a phone consult if someone's interested,
I
but
do.
unsure?
Yep, I call it a strategy call, or you can call it a discovery call. So it's 20 to 30 minutes where we can talk about, just make sure that we're a good fit to work together is really
Yeah,
my goal, to make sure that what you have going on is something that I feel like I can help you with,
yeah,
that you feel comfortable with me as a practitioner and kind of what I do and what I stand for. So yeah, I do that typically. I'm happy to sign somebody on without that, but it's nice to know if you're going to invest that you are comfortable with who you're,
absolutely.
you know, putting your investment in. So
Yeah, and then that way they can
yeah,
talk to you about just like all of the other things that come with starting with a new practitioner, like
exactly.
payment and insurance and schedule and like plans and things like that would be helpful to know.
Exactly.
I think that'd be great to do
Mhm.
a strategy call and just explore and see what's best. But
Yeah.
yeah. Well,
Yay.
thanks for
Thanks
being
for
here.
having me.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
I learned a lot. So
Good. Well,
I
and if
appreciate it.
anybody has questions, you can always pass them my way and I'm happy to answer questions.
Sounds good. I'll just pass them across the hall since
Yeah.
you're so close, which is really nice too if you
Under
work
the
with
door.
both of us. Yeah, perfect.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
I'm here or I do virtual. So either
Okay,
way.
sounds good. Well, I'll have
Awesome.
your information. We'll put that in the email. And then if there's any other information just about you and your practice you want to put in the email, just let me know. And we'll get
Okay.
that out to all of you guys.
Thanks, Angela.
Thank you.